Merci beaucoup. Tout d'abord, grand merci de m'avoir invité, grand merci à l'Académie de m'avoir invité pour présenter les travaux. Compte tenu que certains de mes collègues avec qui je travaille régulièrement, qui vont présenter après moi, ne parlent pas français, je me permettrai de faire cette présentation en anglais. Je suis certain que tous dans cette audience maîtrisent parfaitement ce langage, compte tenu du volume de publications scientifiques en anglais. So I will start today to talk about optical imaging of perfusion. I'm a professor at University of Strasbourg in biomedical engineering and also visiting professor of surgery at Harvard Medical School at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. A quick outline of my talk. First, because I have the honor of being the first speaker, I will go over the motivations and why optical imaging in general, fluorescence in particular, can have an impact on surgery, and we can help surgeons to make decisions during surgery. I will talk then about fluorescence imaging more particularly, which will certainly be a base for the next talk, where surgeons and technologists will talk more about imaging system and applications. I would like to introduce to you also another concept in optical imaging, which is right now gaining some traction, which is the use of endogenous contrast without contrast agent injection to help imaging, in particular oxygenation in real time during surgery, and I'll finish with some conclusion. So as an engineer by training, I always like to go to the ORs and look what equipment is available to surgeons when they perform the surgeries. And I do like also to compare with history and see how a surgical room was looking like in the 1950s and how it does look like in the 2000s. From my perspective, it's a striking fact to notice that there's very few technological improvements, despite all the technologies being developed to help our daily lives with phones, GPS, communication in general. The only real progress have been in terms of technology, going from analogic electronic to digital electronic with the instrumentation here, and cyclic lights, the surgical operating lights. And we can see that there's very few tools today to help surgeons doing their surgeries, in particular in helping them knowing what should be resected, what should not be resected. In a gross manner, I would say, from a technical perspective and my limited knowledge of surgery, I would say that surgery is still performed somewhat subjectively, which means based on the senses of surgeon and their experience. And therefore, when you run the numbers on many procedures, there is a viable outcome based on this experience. And of course, recurrence, morbidity, mortality. So as engineers and physicists, we ask ourselves, how can we help you perform better surgeries? So how light can improve this? Well, the basis of light-tissue interactions are essential to understand how we can use photons to give you information that is not available currently. And this is a simple hand in front of a white light source. Two things happen in particular in this image. First of all, it's red. It's red because of the absorption of different species that are present within the end of the subject. And it's also blurry. We don't know where the light is coming from, really. And that is due to the scattering, the diffusion of light within the medium. Finally, what's not represented here is the fact that there are fluorescent species. We can inject them, or they can be here naturally inside the organism. So what can we do today? And I bring that into the concept, the global concept of what's called molecular imaging for surgery. On the one side, we can do what's called exogenous information. And with this, we can do the qualitative contrast agent localization, which means we do inject the contrast agents that can be specific, meaning it's going to a tumor particularly, or it can be non-specific. We'll talk about perfusion particularly here, which will be non-specific. And the surgeon has this beautiful image where you can clearly notice a very, very bright star, like we see on a black background, that helps him localize where is the fluorescence. But where is different from how much fluorescence is present, right? So it's really qualitative imaging. On the other hand, we can do also endogenous information in which we can extract absorption and scattering, meaning the two fundamental interaction concepts of photons with tissues. And in this case, we will perform what's called quantitative imaging. In this case, we will be able to obtain oxygen saturation matrix, metabolism matrix, hydration, and subcellular content. And both of these can play a major role in bringing new information content to surgeons. So in summary, for this short motivation, optical imaging can bring endogenous and exogenous contrast available during surgery. It can provide structural and functional contrast. It can image relatively deeply, let's say up to 1 centimeter within the tissue, which is perfectly fine for many cases in surgery. It's non-contact, which is very important, of course, inexpensive, because it relies on consumer market electronics mostly, and therefore my lab and others believe that it is an ideal candidate for surgical guidance. I will now talk about more about fluorescence imaging, the basics of fluorescence imaging, and give you some perspective on how fluorescence imaging can have an impact on perfusion assessments. So when one thinks about fluorescence imaging, there are really two concepts that needs to be kept in mind. On the one side, contrast agents, and here is depicted indocyanine in green, which is an FDA-approved contrast agent for other indications than the one I will talk about. And things to remember, particularly there is an absorption spectrum where the dye, the contrast agent, absorbs energy from light and re-emits energy on this red curve, which is called the emission curve. So effectively, what do? We bring a device in, which is the second part of fluorescence imaging. This device will excite here at 760 nanometers, which is about here, and we will image what's coming out of that fluorescence. So again, we come back to that concept of being qualitative. All we do is excite a molecule and get the signal to locate where it is located inside the tissue. So for what I call fluorescence angiography in general, there's two steps, very easy. The first one is intravenous injection of a contrast agent, primarily usually ICG, indocyanine green, a bolus of about 4 milligrams diluted in saline and injected intravenously. And the surgeon brings in device and looked at the fluorescence over time. So there's a lot of devices out there that are commercially available, and I'm mostly focusing on perioperative and not endoscopic devices, and another broad range of endoscope device as well. Just to point out as well, there's also a French company that's actually doing fluorescence imaging, Fluoptics, with their Fluobim. But there's a broad spectrum, and surgeons have a lot of choice when it comes to imaging, in particular ICG, which is the major contrast agent used today in the clinic when it comes to test this hypothesis. I'll give you an example here, which we did a few years back, that will give you a sense of what you can really observe. And what I'd like you to pay attention here in the fluorescence picture, we just injected intravenously, and we're looking at the swine heart beating in real time with prospective gating. And you can see here the arterial phase that highlights the coronary arteries. Then it goes through the heart and then comes back to the veins. So basically what I really want to show you here is really what you can observe, and this will be true for any organ you use fluorescence angiography with, is divided into, let's say, 3 phases. The first one is arterial, the second one is venous, and then fluorescence tends to get diffused into the tissue, bringing some background. It's been used quite a bit in humans and also animals and humans. This is an example from swine again, in which we're doing a fluorescence bolus injection of ICG in the colon of a swine. And you can see here very nice perfusion patterns where you see actually you hear the arterial phase of a normal bowel, but when you ligate here, you can see the feeding arteries. When you ligate these arteries, then you can see a lack of fluorescence, and lack of fluorescence means lack of perfusion, which means potentially a defect during the surgery. So this is being taken to human, and many investigators have shown the benefit, in particular in the case of colorectal anastomosis, with reduction of complication, in particular leaks, for about 6%, bringing the numbers from 10% complication rate to 4% complication rate. Another example, which is inhuman this time, from flap reconstruction surgery following mastectomy in breast cancer patients. The idea here is, the question we're asking is, how can we select a flap? Like, we know that the first metric a surgeon uses capillary refill and the look of the flap, so we're trying to bring another metric here to look at the perforators and how well is that flap perfused. Here are the two flaps, the left and the right flap. You can see in fluorescence. They're pretty well perfused, but this one tends to be a little better. Here it's a little dark. So the surgeon, independently of this, based on this, because it's only a clinical trial, so the surgeon cannot base his decision on the fluorescence. The surgeon intuitively chose this one that we elevated and basically transplanted onto the subject. And after transplantation, we did a bolus injection to verify whether the anastomosis were well performed and the flap was well perfused. So you all understand, I'm sure, the potential of this technology and how great it is. And many other talks will talk about liver in particular or other colorectal applications. Because there's a large portion of discussion, I want to bring a few potential concerns. The first one is qualitative assessment only. There is no viability information in these images, meaning you're not able to judge whether a flap will survive or will not survive. You just know whether it's perfused. And the second point is what you look at is very short. During a few seconds, you see the arterial phase, the venous phase, and then the signal diffuses into the organ. And you need to wait about 10 to 15 minutes before you do another injection to reduce the background within the organ. So that's another potential concern. Some of my colleagues work on using the dynamic of fluorescence to augment the, let's say, the objectivity of the measure. In this case, we look at how fast the signal is rising as an indicator of how well it is perfused. You can see here an overlay map from Michele Diana at IRCA DHU in Strasbourg, where he's trying to locate where there's a potential lack of perfusion in the flap. In a few minutes I have left, I will transition to endogenous imaging to give you a perspective of what else can we bring. And one of the main concerns throughout these years working with fluorescence is indeed the lack of objectivity and measure, right? So we're trying to bring another technology which basically relies on imaging the interaction between photons and tissue to extract endogenous intrinsic information without the use of a contrast agent, which can potentially also speed up the translation of this technology. The main hurdle really for an engineer standpoint is how can we bring this to surgery? Three main pillars. It has to be real-time, quantitative, and wide field. And this is a little diagram depicting the relationship between all these metrics. Fluorescence stands here, it's real-time and wide field. But really what we would like to do is merge the three to provide objective, true measure information. And that's something we've been developing in my group by bringing technology called single snapshot of optical properties. Very briefly, I won't go in detail into this slide. We shine pattern illumination onto tissues that help us measure the interaction in absorption and scattering, which down the line can help us image the concentration of oxyhemoglobin, deoxyhemoglobin in micromolar concentration within the tissue, meaning quantitatively, and later, for instance, oxygenation. So this is the type of image that you will see. This is here a skin flap experiment on a swine that's been occluded here on that side and tracked with an FDA-approved device for measurement of tissue saturation. As you know, with the oxygen pool, the hemoglobin pool into the flap, it gets red when you ligate the venous outflow. This is what you will see visually, and this is what we see with our system. At every pixel on this image, we're able to give you a saturation number, meaning what is the saturation locally onto this flap. And we can compare that, of course, with FDA-approved device and get good agreements. I'd like to highlight that we actually extract the concentration of hemoglobin to obtain the saturation. So in the video, that's what you would like. You can see here in the middle window the actual increase and decrease of oxygenation in real time during the surgery. That's a potential indicator. We do that also in the bowel. You can see here again, decrease and then increase into oxygenation. We do that in the liver. As you can see here, it's actually the first time it's been shown in the liver. And what's really important to us is that not only can we track oxygenation, but we actually can differentiate here an arterial occlusion versus a venous occlusion. So not only can we tell there's a problem in saturation, but we also point to the origin of the problem, which is an additional value. And of course, we translated that into first human pilot study in breast reconstruction following mastectomy breast cancer, and we were able to safely try this. So in conclusion, two things. On one side, endogenous information with fluorescence is great, it's out there, it's being tested, and you will see a lot of very great talks after me from surgeons using this. And I wanted to point out, just on the clock, I just wanted to point out that we can also do additional information value by going endogenous. And I would like to thank my sponsors and my group in the US and in France. And thank you for your attention.
Merci beaucoup Sylvain, c'est très, très démonstratif. Qui veut poser des questions? On peut poser des questions en français?
It was a real talk. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Even I understood everything, and my colleague too. I asked just one question. Why, coming from a French university at Strasbourg, I am born in Colmar, why do you speak in English, even you can speak French fluently?
C'est une excellente question. Comme je le disais en introduction, nous avons deux professeurs, Luigi Boni d'Italie qui ne parle pas français et le professeur Soledad de Karl Stolz. Donc je voulais que cette présentation soit aussi accessible à cet auditoire. Et je rêve. Bien évidemment, je parle français.
French Academy. French Academy. You know, in France, it's Académie nationale, not French.
Nobel, si je peux poser la question en français, sinon je le pose en anglais, mais en français. D'abord, je veux dire que c'est vrai qu'on a beaucoup opéré jusqu'à maintenant et on le faisait sans cette technologie, et que cette technologie apporte sûrement quelque chose dans un certain nombre de cas. J'aurais aimé savoir quand même quelles sont les contreparties de cette technologie, parce que j'ai compris que ça prenait du temps, que quand on utilisait des produits de contraste, il fallait prendre du temps entre deux injections, et il faut sûrement beaucoup de matériel. Donc, quels sont les désavantages de cette technologie?
Votre question. Alors, je dirais les désavantages en termes opérationnels, vous voulez dire, hein, pas en termes de, je dirais, administratifs, puisqu'il y a aussi toute une partie comment amener ça dans un hôpital en France avec les revues qui sont nécessaires pour pouvoir amener des essais cliniques. Je parlerai uniquement de l'opérationnel. Hein. Au niveau du matériel, ce n'est pas si compliqué que ça, puisqu'il y a, à l'heure actuelle, comme je l'ai montré, beaucoup de produits existants qui sont commercialisés et qui permettent d'imager la fluorescence. Donc, je dirais la difficulté que moi personnellement j'ai rencontrée lorsqu'on a fait nos essais de chevellement, on a fait plus de 1000 patients aujourd'hui, c'est surtout de pouvoir intégrer tout le staff dans la pratique de la fluorescence. Comment convaincre les personnes autres que les chirurgiens que cela va être utile, même si ça peut peut-être apporter quelquefois, dans certains cas, un petit peu plus de temps. C'est toujours un petit peu difficile de changer les pratiques, vous le savez bien. Donc ça fait partie, je dirais, du côté de l'éducation, on va dire, des personnels de santé, sur comment convaincre une équipe qui travaille ensemble, qui a un workflow, excusez-moi, je passé 10 ans, c'est un peu difficile d'essayer de tout traduire.
Peut-être dû rester d'ailleurs.
Et qui donc, comment arriver à convaincre que... parce que les chirurgiens sont toujours en général très enthousiastes par rapport à cette nouvelle technologie, ça leur apporte des informations supplémentaires qui sont utiles. Mais vraiment, pratiquement, le plus dur, c'est pas l'instrument, c'est pas l'injection d'un agent de contraste qui lui-même est disponible, on peut l'acheter, mais c'est vraiment changer la mentalité et faire en sorte d'éduquer le personnel de santé pour qu'ils comprennent, pour au moins qu'ils essaient et qu'ils puissent tirer une expérience de la fluorescence. J'espère que ça répond à votre question.
Merci. Je voudrais poser une question essentiellement sur les lambeaux, puisque vous avez montré l'école de lambeaux de vascularisation.
Et bon, c'est sûrement très bien en péropératoire. Je voudrais même me placer en post-opératoire, puisque le problème du lambeau, si vous voulez, c'est la reprise précoce pour nous les chirurgiens. C'est-à-dire de décider au moment où un lambeau risque de nécroser, avant la nécrose, de pouvoir faire éventuellement un geste de revascularisation. Est-ce que vous avez des données sur justement la perfusion post-opératoire grâce à la fluorescence?
Alors, la perfusion post-opératoire, moi je n'en ai jamais fait, personnellement. Les expériences qu'on a menées, qui vont dans le sens de votre question, je vais y répondre de cette manière, c'est que nous avons essayé de regarder la prédictabilité de la nécrose sur des lambeaux de rats en particulier, sur un modèle très connu de lambeaux en U, pour pouvoir donc dire quand on a ce niveau de fluorescence, ça va être nécrotique. Et ben ça n'a pas forcément très bien marché, je vais vraiment être honnête. Tout simplement, encore une fois, je pense que c'est une technique qui peut être un peu subjective encore, qui ne fait pas une mesure. Mais au niveau post-op, je n'ai pas l'expérience personnellement. Mais au niveau intraopératoire, à l'heure actuelle, sur les lambeaux, je n'ai pas vu de démonstration comme quoi la fluorescence pouvait être prédictive de la survie du lambeau.
Oui, Sylvain. D'abord, je voulais te remercier parce que tu arrives des États-Unis, tu viens faire cette conférence, tu repars. Donc voilà, même si tu as parlé en anglais, moi j'ai très bien compris ce que tu avais dit. Le point clé, c'est que ta technologie permet de mesurer l'oxygénation et la désoxygénation des tissus. Et ça, c'est un vrai plus par rapport à d'autres technologies. Et en particulier, est-ce que tu penses que ça peut permettre finalement de mettre en évidence un vrai problème en chirurgie qui est le problème de l'outflow? En fait, lorsqu'on fait de la chirurgie digestive, de la chirurgie hépatique, on est parfois confronté à des problèmes qui sont liés non pas à des problèmes d'inflow, parce que l'inflow est évident, parce qu'on voit quelque chose qui est blanc, qui n'est pas du tout vascularisé, mais le problème d'outflow, de congestion veineuse. Est-ce que tu penses que tes outils peuvent te permettre de quantifier cette congestion veineuse? Parce que ça, c'est un vrai plus.
Alors, tout à fait. En particulier sur l'oxygénation, on a une mesure qui est très précise, j'ai des données d'ailleurs qui démontrent qu'on arrive à corréler fonctionnellement et structurellement la dégradation des tissus en fonction de la congestion justement, qui peut être indicateur de la survie du lambeau. Donc je te confirme que oui, on en est capable aujourd'hui. Autre chose que je voudrais mentionner, tu parles de mesures quantitatives, il y a aujourd'hui des méthodes qui sont développées pour faire de la fluorescence quantitative aussi. De manière plus quantitative, il y a toute une, on va dire une range, toute une gamme de quantification disponible entre la mesure elle-même de la concentration du fluorophore localement jusqu'à faire des mesures qui sont peut-être plus répétables et qui permettraient d'extraire des niveaux qui pourraient être corrélés à la survie d'un greffon par exemple.
Dernière petite question, qu'est-ce que vous avez comme essai clinique en cours pour évaluer cette méthode?
La méthode d'oxygénation? Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on a en cours? On a un ERC qui nous permet d'aller à l'humain sur le site de Strasbourg, lequel l'IHU en particulier, sur lequel on va justement, on a fait un premier essai sur humain, donc de ce qu'on appelle une safety pilot study, donc une phase 0, comme on les appelle, et on va rentrer donc en phase 1 sur des applications péropératoires et endoscopiques en oxygénation.
Et dans quelles indications particulières? La
Alors,
chirurgie colorectale?
Voilà, la chirurgie colorectale, deux choses en particulier. La première, donc vasculaire, c'est-à-dire l'anastomose, pouvoir prédire si le tissu va survivre, évidemment. Et une deuxième dimension, qui est, on dira, plus ambitieuse, qui est celle de la détection du cancer colorectal de manière précoce.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Très belle